Being home alone can feel peaceful, a rare moment of calm. You enjoy the silence, your music, your movies. The house becomes your sanctuary. But sometimes the silence grows heavy. Every noise seems louder. The creaking floor, the wind, suddenly unsettling. Shadows play tricks, imagination runs wild. For some, that fear became real. The stories that follow are theirs. True tales of terror, alone at home. Watch until the end. The last story will shock you. Story 1. Let me introduce you to Mark, the main character of this story. Mark is 30 years old. At the time, Mark lived in a big 2-story house. It was a family home. His sister lived downstairs and Mark lived upstairs. Their apartments were separate, but they shared the same roof. That night, Mark's sister had gone to spend the night at her boyfriend's place. So Mark was completely alone in this big building. He watched a movie, then went to bed around midnight. Mark felt perfectly calm as usual. The house was silent, peaceful. It was around 1 in the morning when everything started. Mark was sleeping deeply when a voice woke him up. Mark, Mark. It was his sister's voice. No doubt about it. It came from downstairs, from her apartment. His first reaction was annoyance. He thought she had forgotten her keys and was waking him up to let her in. A little grumpy, Mark got out of bed. The voice continued, a little more insistent. Mark, come down please. He didn't think, he just obeyed, still half asleep. Mark went down the stairs that led to her apartment. The silence had returned. He turned on the hallway light. Sophie? He called. No answer. Mark moved carefully, turning on the living room light, then the kitchen light. Everything was in order, but there was no one there. It was empty. A strange feeling began to come over Mark. Why would she call him and then disappear? He walked towards her bedroom at the end of the hallway and turned on the light. The bed was made. No one. The apartment was deserted. Mark felt a first shiver. It was weird. He shouted her name louder. Sophie! Are you there? Silence answered him. A heavy, absolute silence. Mark was about to go back upstairs, telling himself he must have dreamed it, when suddenly he heard a dull thud. A clear boom coming from her bedroom. The room he had just checked, and where there was absolutely no one. Mark's heart started pounding like crazy. This was not a dream. Something or someone was in the house with Mark. Story 2. My name is Alex, and this is what happened to me when I was 14 years old. It was a Friday night, and my mom, who's a nurse, was working the night shift at the hospital. I was home alone. My friend Molly had just left. I went upstairs to my room to play video games. The house was quiet. Our house had a big wooden deck in the back right under my bedroom window. Everything was normal until I heard a noise. It was the sound of a chair being dragged across the wooden deck. It was a very distinct sound. Curious, I went to the window to look. My heart jumped into my throat. There was a man sitting on one of our patio chairs on the deck. He wasn't a friend of mine or a neighbor. A stranger. He was just sitting there in the dark, staring at my window. He knew I was there. I immediately ducked down, my heart pounding. What was he doing there? What did he want? I waited for a few moments, hoping he would leave. After what felt like an eternity, I risked another peek. He was still there, motionless. He kept staring at my window with a terrifying intensity. I was frozen, but I gathered what little courage I had. I opened the window a little and yelled in a shaky voice, "What do you want?" The man didn't answer. His shoulders started to shake as if he was laughing. A silent laugh, which was even more unsettling. Then a hoarse sound, a sort of whistle, came from his throat. Terrified, I backed away from the window and hid in a corner of my room. A few moments later, I heard violent noises. He was trying to force open the patio door. Bang, bang, boom, he was shaking the handle with force. Luckily, my mom was very careful, and all the doors were always locked. After failing at the back door, I heard his footsteps running around the house. Then he started to pound on the front door. I was too paralyzed with fear to call the police. Finally, the noises stopped. He was gone. My mom was furious that I hadn't called 911. To this day, I still regret it. Story 3. My name is Clara, and I was only 10 years old. It was the most terrifying night of my life. My 14-year-old brother had just been hit by a car. My parents got a call from the hospital and left in a hurry, taking my 5-year-old sister with them but leaving me home alone. They told me to lock the door tight and not to be afraid, but in their panic, they forgot to lock it themselves. I didn't know it yet. I was worried about my brother, but I tried to be brave. It was well past midnight. I was in my bed, but I couldn't sleep. That's when I heard a noise, the sound of the front door opening softly. I listened closely, waiting to hear my parents' voices, but there was only silence. A cold shiver ran through me. It wasn't my parents. I slipped out of bed and tiptoed to my bedroom door, which opened onto the top of the stairs. I looked through the railing towards the living room plunged in darkness. And I saw them. 3 large black shadows standing still in the middle of the room. They weren't talking. They weren't moving. My blood ran cold. I backed away as quietly as possible, but as I closed my bedroom door, it made a small click. In that silence, it echoed like a gunshot. I had alerted them. I ran to hide in the closet, burying myself behind boxes and old clothes, holding my breath. I heard footsteps coming up the stairs, then entering my room. My closet door opened. One of the silhouettes stood there in the doorway. I couldn't see its face in the darkness. It stood silent for what felt like an eternity, then closed the door and left. About an hour later, my parents came home. They found the front door wide open and several valuables missing. They had burglarized the house while I was hidden in the closet. Story 4, and the last one. This is the story of Julian, a 23-year-old who was living alone for the first time in his life. That afternoon, Julian was playing basketball on the small court he had in his driveway in front of the house. As he turned to get the ball, he looked up at the front of the house. His heart stopped. In the window of one of the upstairs bedrooms, there was a woman. He didn't know her. She was just there, still, and she was watching him. As soon as their eyes met, she disappeared from the window as if she had quickly ducked down. At first, Julian thought his mind was playing tricks on him. He put down his ball and went into the house. "Is anyone here?" he yelled. No answer. The back door, which led to the garden, was unlocked. He must have forgotten to close it. Julian thought maybe the person had entered and left through there. He called his neighbor, a big, friendly guy, to help him check. Together, they searched the whole house, from the attic to the basement, every closet, every corner. There was no one. Nothing had been stolen, nothing seemed out of place. His neighbor told him he had probably imagined the whole thing. It was the most logical explanation. Julian agreed, although a feeling of unease lingered. He tried not to think about it anymore. He spent his evening normally, had dinner, watched television. Julian made sure all the doors and windows were locked this time. He felt a little paranoid, but after what he thought he saw, it was normal. He finally went to bed, trying to get that image out of his mind. The night was silent. Julian was lying in his bed in complete darkness, trying to fall asleep, but he was restless. Every little noise made him jump. He kept tossing and turning in his sheets. That's when he heard a very distinct sound, a slight rustling, a rubbing of fabric, coming from under his bed. At first, Julian thought his imagination was playing tricks on him again. But the sound repeated. It wasn't a hallucination. There was indeed someone in his room. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. An animal? The neighbor's cat? But the sound was too purposeful. Fear, cold and paralyzing, took hold of me. I didn't dare move or even breathe. I listened, my ears strained to the maximum. Then, slowly, I turned my head on my pillow, towards the edge of the bed. And that's when I saw her. A human shape was crawling out from under my bed. In the dim light of the room, I recognized the woman I had seen at the window a few hours earlier. She was slowly getting up, like a predator. The realization hit me like a punch. She had been in the house all this time. She was hidden under my bed while I was eating dinner, watching TV, while I was trying to sleep. Fear gave way to a pure adrenaline rush. I let out a scream, a primal howl of terror and rage. I don't know where I found the strength. Without thinking, I jumped out of bed and threw myself at her. I pinned her to the ground. She struggled with surprising strength. She scratched me, bit me. It was a chaotic fight in the dark. My screams alerted my neighbor, the one who had helped me search the house. He broke down my bedroom door and came to help me hold her down. Together we managed to hold her down until the police, whom my neighbor had called, arrived. When the police arrived, they recognized the woman immediately. They called her Karen. Apparently it wasn't the first time they had dealt with her. She had mental health issues and sometimes broke into people's homes. She wasn't there to steal, but simply to be there, to hide, to watch. That idea is almost more terrifying. I had 2 scars on my arm from her scratches, but the deepest scar isn't visible. For months I checked under my bed every night before going to sleep. These stories remind us, home isn't always as safe as we think. Being alone can make us vulnerable, but most fears are just in our heads. Still, a single mistake, an unlocked door, a strange noise, can change everything. So, lock your doors and windows, and keep your phone close. Know your neighbors, they can help. Enjoy your home, but stay alert. Be careful, and never forget to lock up.